Some of you may wonder how it is that a health foundation like the California Endowment came to care about an issue like solitary confinement. And I want to tell you a story about that that has become a very important story for us that has to do with our Building Healthy Communities initiative. It's a 10-year initiative that we're about halfway through. And it's really rooted in place, it's rooted in community, it's rooted in trying to understand what it is that it will take to truly make healthy and thriving communities in California, in some of the places where health hasn't always happened at the community level. And as a health foundation, we came to the table knowing a lot about things like healthy food and the importance of healthy environments, clean air, of course, access to health care. But there were some very important things that we learned from our community work that we did not know. And one of those things is about the importance of the intersection of health and the justice system. We learned about that from young people who said things to us like, well, if you really want to have healthier communities, one thing that would help is if we weren't getting kicked out of school all the time for nonsense reasons. And we said, what? Tell us some more about that. And it turns out that young people in California were and still are being suspended too often from school, and oftentimes for symptoms of health problems, right? So it's not any accident that children who go through trauma and adversity at home and in their communities come to school not knowing what to do with all those feelings and that anxiety and that trauma. And guess what? It shows up in school, and sometimes it shows up in their behavior. And when we punish and kick children out of school for symptoms of health problems, we're not making progress. So we learned that. And we learned that school suspension also led to greater odds of interaction with the justice system, getting in trouble with the law. And we learned more about how all this plays out. And really what we have come to think of as a culture of punishment in our society. A lot of times it results from punishing people for symptoms of health problems, not only young people, but people who struggle with mental illness, people who struggle with depression, who struggle with addiction to substances that, again, come from places of pain. And so when we think of the intersection of health and the justice system, we at the California Endowment want to imagine a world in which safety isn't defined by punishment and incarceration, but rather by health and education and prevention and healing. And so we hope that together we can think through and talk through tonight what a new vision of community safety might look like that doesn't involve punishment and incarceration and such extreme punishment as solitary confinement, which we don't actually know how many people are surviving solitary confinement right now. We think it's between 80 and 100,000 people in this country, but the health effects of that are profound and severe. And so we come together tonight to bear witness to this play that helps us to understand the profound impact of solitary confinement on the health and wellness of the people who survive it, but not only the people who survive it, but the ripple effect, right, on their families, on their communities, and how it all comes together in ways that harm the health of our society. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Sarah Shourd, whose name may be familiar to some of you who follow the news, and that's because she was one of 3 Americans who were captured while hiking in Iraqi Kurdistan. She lived in Syria at the time. She was on a hiking trip and ended up being captured by the Iranian military. And she was held in solitary confinement for more than a year, for 410 days to be exact. And her 2 friends, one of whom is now her husband, were eventually released. And as you might imagine, that set Sarah's life on a different course. She had already been a human rights and a peace advocate, but since returning to the United States, she is now telling her story and the stories of others who have survived solitary confinement through her work as an advocate and a scholar and a playwright. And we're so pleased tonight to have her with us, to have excerpts from her acclaimed new play, The Box, to be performed here. And following the performance, she will be moderating a panel discussion with representatives of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, street poets, and the Unusual Suspects Theater Company. So please join me in welcoming Sarah.
My friend and colleague, Rebecca Solnit, wrote a book called Hope in the Dark that I pick up off the shelf every now and then. These are dark times, she wrote, a darkness as much of the womb as of the grave. As much of the womb as of the grave. Solitary confinement is a dark topic. I've gone there time and time again, and I do need to replenish myself. And I think we all need to hold that strength going in. I got out of prison about 7 years ago now, and the year after that I fought for my husband and friend to get out. I traveled all around the world. I was in the middle of a international diplomacy between governments, and it was an empowering experience to move through the most difficult experience and then find myself a free woman again and ask myself, what am I going to do with this? What reason do I have to get out of bed? And I started to look into the situation here, and I was absolutely shocked and appalled, horrified. I knew mass incarceration. I grew up in an activist household, radical single mom. So I've always been in the movement. I've always been, and that led to journalism. That led to my moving to the Middle East to continue my anti-war work by teaching Iraqi and Syrian and Palestinian refugees. Coming back here to this country and learning that the horror that almost broke me, that almost took away, threatened my dignity, my sanity, my very future, was routine in our prisons. Literally almost identical conditions, 23 hours a day in a small cell. Many cells here have no windows. I had a window with bars and perforated metal. 1 hour in a slightly larger open air cell, they call it, here they call it the dog run. In Iran, they called it havo-khori, the place to eat air. Up to 100,000 people on any given day subjected to something that does absolutely nothing to rehabilitate them. Does nothing whatsoever to help people find something good in themselves, a reason to live, a reason to improve, a reason to keep going. So I hit the ground running because it's kind of what I know how to do, and it was how I kept myself from falling apart, I think. And first we wrote a book about our own experience. It's called A Sliver of Light. And then I started to interview prisoners in solitary confinement. I've traveled to over 15 facilities around the country, written men and women that have been in solitary confinement for 5, 10, 15, up to 40 years. And again, what I found from these people was unbelievable humanity. Just sitting across, talking through glass, picking up the phone receiver, and, tell me about you. Tell me about what brought you here. Tell me what you live for. It was an amazing opening to be able to find that intimacy with people and to immerse myself in their stories. So a lot of these stories people told in their own words. There are a lot of incredible writers in the whole, in solitary confinement around the country, because the pen is one of your only real ways of building a bridge. If you have the skills, unfortunately, a lot of people that go into solitary confinement are illiterate, haven't finished elementary school. We're put on that path at a very, very, very young age. And many of you here may have experience with that yourself directly, or someone you know, someone you love. There's always a point of intersection to help you walk in the shoes of these people that are our neighbors, are our loved ones, are us. So a lot of these stories, people that were, handy with the pen would we helped them to edit their stories and publish them in an anthology. It's called Hell is a Very Small Place. And that was published with my colleagues at Solitary Watch last year. And then my play came out. So the stories that I collected, over 75 testimonies, were filtered through me, through my own experience as an artist. And I wrote them into this play, The Box, that premiered. The world premiere was last month in San Francisco in the Mission. And I had Michael Garces, who is a local director at the Cornerstone Theater here in Los Angeles. He's Cuban, Venezuelan, amazingly talented cast of actors, and it was absolutely the fulfillment of a dream that for me came out of that darkness, and came out, and every single word in the play came out of a prison cell somewhere, a human being, a beating heart, somewhere in this country today.
What did I do? Everybody in here been sentenced twice. The first time is what y'all know about on the outside, court, a lawyer, sometimes a jury.
Second time, we don't get none of that shit. It's all done internally.
That's why we call this a prison within a prison.
The guards have been plotting my murder for the last 8 months. I hear them whispering about me at night usually. And the next morning I'm like, shit, did that really happen? Who's gonna believe that?
Screaming, voices, flashing lights. I hear and see things a part of me knows ain't there.
Over 3,000 people came to see the play in the Mission. It was unbelievable to just see this people's crowds streaming through every day, people stepping up to a political act, asking actually quite a lot of a person to sit through 2 hours of a very immersive, intense, brutal, and beautiful, I hope, theatrical performance. And we're hoping the play will travel. You're only going to get a taste of it tonight. The story was inspired partly, it's fictionalized, and I drew from many voices, many stories, but it was inspired by the historic California hunger strike, the anniversary of which was just about a month and a half ago. Do people remember the historic California hunger strike? Yes, yes. It was the third in a series of hunger strikes born in the deep end of solitary confinement in Pelican Bay Prison up north, which I traveled to many times. And a racial alliance was formed between 4 leaders of different racial groups. And despite all odds, these 4 men, who had all been in isolation upwards of 10, 15 years, decided the only way we're going to make any change is if we actually come together on this. It sounds very idealistic. One critic that didn't know that my play was based on a historic event actually called it a liberal fantasy. And I said, well, that's funny, because it actually happened. So these guys came together, sworn enemies, people that would have killed each other on the main line in a heartbeat. And they said, if we all do this together, many, many, many people on the outside might join, change might be possible. 30,000 other prisoners joined from across the state. Some of them went on without food for up to 60 days. And their core demand was the end of solitary confinement. There's been the ripple effects from that act are still being seen. They had some condition changes. The guys got jalapenos for the first time in 15 years, pull-up bar, longer visits. I mean, those things are that's not small, But a lawsuit came out of the California hunger strike, the Ashker versus Governor Brown, that was settled. And as a result, indefinite solitary confinement is now illegal in the state of California. The limit now in California, this doesn't sound that great, but the limit is now 10 years. Everyone who got out, which is 1,000 people as a result of this lawsuit, had been in for over 10 years. And these were the people that CDCR, California Department of Corrections, the R is silent. There's not very much rehabilitation going on in the state. CDC said that these 1,000 people were the worst of the worst, the most violent, the ones beyond hope of reform, the ones that should never get out. Those guys would have been in there until they died. And now they're out on the main line, and there hasn't been violence. They're out there, they're the old school political prisoners that are teaching the younger generation the lessons that they won, through such hard struggle and dedication. So the hope in the darkness, the possibility of change, the incubator that these horrible torture chambers that can actually be for humanity, those that are not broken, and everyone's broken in some way or the other, but those that find something deep in themselves, a deeper love, a deeper commitment, a deeper vision, deserve to share that. And so that's the idea of the box, is to capture some of those voices. So these are adults. Most of the people that I corresponded with are adults in solitary confinement, people who had been in for long periods of time. What I found again and again were the, sort of OG guys who had been in for 10, 15 years. Their first stint in solitary confinement was as a juvenile, because it sets you on that path. One of the things that I learned in researching solitary confinement against juveniles, that solitary confinement attacks the frontal lobe. It's the part of your brain that helps you make decisions, helps you with impulse control. So our young people, our children, that may not have been taught the skills to deal with their anger, may not have been taught the skills for good communication, nonviolent communication. People that have been through just unbelievable trauma and tragedy their entire lives end up in a system that put them in conditions that take away their ability to make good choices. It's insanity. That doesn't even need to be said, but I have to say it. That is the definition of insanity. When we do something to try that is supposed to in some way have some kind of constructive purpose, that is only making everything worse and worse and piling on the trauma, piling on the pain. Ending solitary confinement for juveniles is a really good way to attack the whole practice. And I will mention that I also think that solitary confinement, abolishing and banning solitary confinement, is a way to attack the system of mass incarceration, because solitary confinement is used as a control mechanism. It's a way that guards can arbitrarily, with no oversight, pretty much just disappear anyone who they don't like, someone who's resisting politically. Maybe he's reading too many books about Che Guevara or the Black Panthers. You can put someone in the hole for just about anything. And 99% of the time when a guard accuses someone of something, the so-called court internally sides with the guard. So if we take away that tool, if we take away psychological torture, then hopefully they have to deal with those people. They have to deal with the problems inside, and it will force the system towards rehabilitation and providing some kind of services, any kind of services. The RAND Corporation did a survey across the board, showed that any service whatsoever decreases the need for solitary confinement in a prison. So now we're going to do a panel discussion. We have some really amazing people here. First, David Sanchez is here. And next we have James Anderson, and we have Johnny Ortiz. Welcome, guys. So all three of these men experienced solitary confinement as juveniles, and all three of them are now doing really important work in their communities through arts and political activism. David Sanchez is a street poet. He started doing poetry when he was still incarcerated. James Anderson is part of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, a really incredible organization, and he's studying political science. And third, last but not least, Johnny Ortiz is part of the Unusual Suspects, doing theater inside juvenile facilities. So, awesome. So we want to start, I just want to kind of let you guys share a few minutes about your own experiences and kind of focus on the impact that solitary confinement had on you and sort of what you learned about yourself from that experience and how the legacy still lives within you.
So my name is David Sanchez. I'm part of Street Poets, Inc. And I've been part of Street Poets for about 10 years. I met Street Poets when I was in juvenile hall and serving a year and a half. Yeah, when I was incarcerated, because of the case that I had at the time, I was there for attempted murder when I was 14. So they isolated me away from the other guys who didn't have serious crimes like that. And it was during that time, we're talking 10 years, so it was during that time when juveniles just started getting tried as an adults. But since I was 14, they couldn't decide whether I was going to be tried as an adult or not. Yeah, so a fitness program. And so I was isolated as soon as I went in there. And the first 2 days, I didn't think much of it because I was like, I'm not gonna be here for a long time. Well, I didn't think I was. And as days started passing by, before they put me in regular GP, I felt like I was going crazy. I missed my family. I missed the people that I was always around. And I started questioning everything, like, man, do I deserve to be alive? Do I deserve this? Like, what's happening? Am I ever gonna get out? It really affected, that's when I found out that I evaluated myself and I was like, I think I suffer from PTSD, you know. To incarcerate a kid, to isolate a kid who he's always suffered from depression, from anger management, violence at home, violence in the streets, just violence, to just put a kid like that in, isolate him, it didn't help me out at all. It actually affected me. It affected my family. It affected the things that I believe to be true. You feel abandoned because where you eat is where you sleep and where you go to the restroom, you know? And you really don't have any privileges, and you really don't have like opportunity, I think, you know. I have two brothers, younger brothers. I'm the oldest one of three. And my little brother is 19 years old. He's currently in Susanville, California, serving 15 years. He's 19, and he's been in solitary confinement for a year and a half. And he communicates through letters only. He's locked down 23 hours a day. He gets no visits and no hot food, and one phone call that's 20 minutes a month. And he tells me how it affects him, and through his letters. Somebody said here earlier, I don't know if it was the guy that was on a play, but he said that you feel like you're in the belly of the beast, like there is no escape, like the system completely swallows you, and you don't know when you're gonna be spit out, you know. And so that's my I guess my experience.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to do a quick follow-up question because, one of the things for me is when I got out after over a year in solitary confinement, the whole time I thought, if I get out of here, and I didn't know if I would, it'll be over. I'll never have to be alone again. I'll just surround myself with love and just dance in the flowers for the rest of my life. Right? It's kind of how I imagined it in my mind to get myself through. It's just going to be beautiful. And it was really hard to get back on my feet. It was making eye contact was physically difficult, uncomfortable. It hurt. When someone touched me, I jumped. And you walk around vigilant, waiting for someone to approach you wrong, or I still do it today. I had a bad experience in the airport today coming here. I told you guys about it.
Right.
So you get used to that cell, and the outside world is much more difficult to manage, which is the horrible irony of that, putting someone in conditions that make it so hard for them to actually succeed or exist on the outside. So what did you find in there? I mean, I know your art is a really important part of your life. Did that actually help you get through? And is that something that still, is that a legacy that sort of lives with you from that experience? It gives you strength?
So yeah, it's funny you were talking about people go to jail. A lot of the homies who go to jail and just people in general, they when they go in there, like I was illiterate, I couldn't read or write. That's very true. I couldn't read or write, and I dropped out of school when I was in 5th grade, maybe 6th grade. I just stopped going. And I would tell moms, of course, that I'm going to school. I walk by the school, but I wouldn't go into school. And so I didn't care too much about the writing and the music or anything behind that. But when I went to juvenile hall is where I discovered poetry. And it's funny how I discovered poetry because when I got put in KL in East Lake Juvenile Hall in Central, when I got put in KL, my roommate, who was actually my enemy, he was already participating in a writing workshop that took place there inside our writers at the time, and still is. And so I met this lady named Roberta, and she gave me my first notebook. And that was in KL. And she just told me, anything that you feel, anything that you see, any emotions, just write it down, and it'll free your soul. And I remember that all the time because she gave me that, and we were allowed to have, of course, these little pencils that are small, so you can't stab anybody. And then I would write, but I couldn't spell, and I couldn't put sentences together. They were all run-off sentences, and I knew that poetry was going to be a tool for me to express myself and free myself from jail. But then after KL and I got my time, whatever, I went to Camp Scobie, and then from Scobie I went to Camp Miller, and that's where I discovered Street Poets Inc. And this man named Christopher Henriksen, I went to his writing workshop, and another friend, my bunkie, because I was in camp at this time, he introduced me to that workshop, and I started going weekly. But I think the only reason why I started going was because every time that I wrote and every time that I shared my story with people, I felt a sense of freedom. I felt like I was free again. I felt that somebody actually cared to listen to me, and the Street Poets became a part of my life. To this day, I still teach, perform, and hang around with the Street Poets in their Poetry in Motion van. So that's where the change started, in camp and juvenile hall. So.
Awesome, thank you. So Johnny, you're from Highland Park, right? And you were in juvenile for a while at 16?
Yes, I did 2 years.
2 years.
In juvenile.
And then you actually you always wanted to be an actor?
Well, I remember being 5 years old and calling 411 and asking how you become an actor. And her name was Star, so I remember her name. Her name was Star, and I always had this dream, but growing up in the neighborhood, most of my dad's side were in gangs, and my mom's side were all in Guatemala. My dad's Mexican and my mom's Guatemalan. Being in that, I always saw myself dead in a wheelchair in prison, because that's all I was brought up to. Growing up in the gangs, it wasn't easy for me. I used to see what led me into that lifestyle was seeing my parents always argue about money, about how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna pay this bill. And that really got me to a point where I wanted to make my own money, but being 8 years old, I can't make my own money, so I started doing it the wrong way. And I ended up serving 2 years in juvenile facility. My experience in juvenile facility was not great and awesome because there's different subjects and different parts in the juvenile facility that is not only wrong. There's different parts that they should stop and they should improve. For example, food itself. You know, I don't mean to say this, but they used to grab the food and they used to put it in their private parts and give it to juvenile kids that didn't like that were their enemies. As a person, you want to have someone to trust your food. There's tons of homies and friends that also went online and they didn't eat because they knew that their friend had gave them a little heads up that not to eat that food because it had either toenails or had something in it. That's something that is not great and it has to be fixed. Solitary confinement in itself, when you're inside there, you don't have a voice. You don't have nothing to say. People say you have rights, but you don't. There's a friend of mine that when there's a conduct that you're not supposed to talk with certain people, certain race. When I was inside there's this kid that did great and he got some chips. He did so great that the probation officer gave him some chips and said, you can eat them on this ship. The next probation officer hopped next to the step and said, you know what, you gotta stop eating those chips. All he did was ask why. Why do I have to stop eating these chips if she just let me eat them like just a minute ago? He said, you're not gonna talk back, go to the shoe. Send them straight to the shoe. I got up myself and I said, we have rights, we have rights. We have rights, and I said it with all my guts. The whole camp stood up and said we had rights. They grabbed me and put me straight to the shoe. They refouled me, said that I was trying to start a riot. Because of that, the judges didn't really see and knew who I was. They just hear and see what they observe and report, but they don't see what we're really going through, the pain that we're feeling. They had judges more come to the juvenile facilities and actually see what the kids are going through, what is happening, have people like, and it's, even if it sounds ridiculous, have people undercovers go in there and to see how they treat these kids, to see how they don't have rights, they treat them like unhuman people. I used to remember waking up and having to get a towel and having to piss on the towel because I needed to use the restroom really badly, but they didn't want to let me use the restroom. And because of certain stuff like that, it made me feel anger, it made me feel painful, and being in a cell where you're just put like a dog and you're just supposed to be there 24 hours. If you're lucky enough and the guard likes you, he'll let you out for 30 minutes to see air or anything. If not, you'll be there for the whole day. I witnessed a guy be there for 2 weeks straight in a row where all he was doing was telling the supervisor, I don't care about life. And he's like, oh, you don't care about life? Okay, let me send you another date. Those are not people that care. They should be people in these juvenile facilities that care about these kids, that truly want to move them and do the best for them. Because, you know, there's a lot of kids out there that need help, that they come from poverty. We come from cultures because of nonprofits, because of California Endowment, because of charities, Unusual Suspect, helping kids out, bringing arts into the kids is why my dream came true. I am in a Disney McFarlane USA that's a worldwide movie, classic movie. I did a TV show called American Crime. Not to brag about my work that I've done, but it's to show people that I had to really strive for that. And now that I have the time, and sometimes I'm traveling a lot, and I'm blessed that all this is happening. Sometimes I don't have time, and I want people, and people don't know every time and every single time that I have that we should advocate for the best of lives. We should advocate to help each other out, to love each other, not to put each other down, you know. Incarcerating people, that's not the way. Bringing more arts into the juvenile facilities, Unusual Suspect was an unusual thing that came into to my world and taught me the acting. And because of that, acting really healed my pain. It healed me. It made me feel a different way. It made me feel like I'm a different person. And this is what we need. We need more arts and community stuff in the community. Yeah. Not, you know, you look at it.
There's power there.
Huh?
There's power in that creative process.
Well,
it gives you a sense of your own power to tell your own story and to define who you are, that they can't define you, that they can't take from you something very essential about yourself.
And you have to, because no one's out there doing it, you know. There's so many people talking about it, saying about it, but what are we gonna do? Let's start doing choices. Let's start, if we have we're a doctor, we're a lawyer, we're whatever we are, let's start helping in any way that we can and helping the community, because we all gotta love each other, help each other, not diminish each other, We all have hands, we all have hearts, and solitary confinement is not the way of doing it. Having kids closed down, it's not the way to do it. It's just not the way. We must fight for that. And I always tell kids, it's not how you start in life, it's how you finish it. And if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Simple as that.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. So James Anderson works with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition that's done incredible game-changing work here in California, passed laws already and backed many initiatives that are going to reduce mass incarceration and particularly affecting the lives of juveniles. So talk about a little bit your trajectory and how you got to this place. And I'm also just really curious because I know you're studying political science, and how does your interest in international work connect with your own story, if it does?
Definitely. Like right now, I'm actually ready to take to the streets after hearing them talk. Like, let's do this. I love it. So my name is James Anderson. I'm 24 years old and spent 5 years of my life behind bars. From the juvenile halls to the camps to the CYAs in California. I think it's funny, like we had a conversation, we had an interview earlier today, and we had a chance to go through a lot of these things. But I didn't realize that I actually experienced solitary confinement before I even went to jail. And I think my link to it is behavior. That's how I grew to understand it, right? I grew up in an abusive family environment. I grew up with a father that gave me crystal meth by the age of 13, 14. I grew up with the brother that would beat me half to death. And I remember these situations of me asking and searching and looking for help and not being able to get it from my father, and the way that he responded to the way I act and the behavior that I showed and the pain that I was exhibiting was, I remember one day we lived on the second floor building, and he locked me in my room and he turned the lock backwards. I remember he left me in there for a couple of days. And it's funny, it's like it barely came to me as I heard him talking. I'm like, I experienced solitary confinement way before, and to me, it's hard to make it normal, as though that was the process that we should be experiencing. Fast forward, of course, I start going in and out of jail. And by the time I'm 17 years old, I'm facing 35 of life. But at this time, I've been taught that the only way to get respect is to fight. The only way to gain any sense of honor in this life was to have people have fear in you. And although I realized that was a lie, during that moment, that's all that I cared about. So I was constantly getting into fights, constantly going to the SHU. But the only thing they taught me every single time they sent me to the SHU, they're just proving it to me that I was an animal, that I deserved to be there, that the world wasn't for me. And I remember there were certain times where I was a kid that never wanted to show weakness. I never wanted to show that they could break me. And I remember one time they put me in the room where the air conditioning was blasting the hardest. And I remember they only gave me a sheet. And I wasn't the kid that would kick on the doors or anything. I wasn't disruptive, but for some reason someone wanted to make a point. And I remember that night at 3 in the morning, I woke up and I was in so much pain that I kept telling myself, because of how cold I was, that you just gotta push through, like you're almost there till the morning. And I remember I finally caved in and I knocked on the door and I asked him if I could please get a blanket. And he looked at me and he laughed and he walked away. And I remember at that moment, the anger that I had in my heart, that feeling of rejection that I carried with me throughout my entire childhood, it stung, it hurt. And it made me even more resentful to any person that had authority, any person that claimed to be someone that watched over you. There's actual documents that prove the funding that CIA put into proving that solitary confinement is used as a torture mechanism. They put you in solitary confinement in Iran because they wanted to give you a Disneyland trip. They wanted to break you down. They wanted to make you suffer. But we use it on our kids. There's not one piece of evidence that shows that this is going to make someone better in any way, shape, or form, including the entire criminal justice system. Because although once you get out of solitary confinement, guess what? You're just in a bigger solitary confinement, away from society. And that continues to affect you in and out throughout your life. I'm going to cut it short, and you asked, how did political science, international relations touch my heart? And it's funny because I've always had, once I came home, I felt like I've been through war. I've seen the worst. I've seen death. I've seen pain. I've seen suffering. And I wanted to go to the parts of the world that had the least amount of help. I wanted to go to the Middle East. I wanted to go parts in South America that literally had no resources. And then I was astonished as I started to study more and realized that in the Middle East, the United States were responsible for the facilities that were being built out there, they were manufacturing them off of models that our country created. So that just like we spread our gang problem, just like we started to deport gang members to Salvador and Mexico and all these other places where they didn't have 18th Street and all these other gangs, and now San Salvador has one of the biggest murder rates in the world because we exported our problem. We're doing the same thing now. We're trying to heal the United States, but we've already shipped that over to other parts of the world. And as leaders, we continue to walk the wrong way. So it's like, when are we going to stand up and realize that we have to make a stand not only for us, but for others and for everyone else that's watching the decisions that we make? Instead of turning the other way, instead of sitting here and listening to us talk today and feeling fired up, feeling passionate, and going home and just letting this simmer down, the question is, like he said, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to stand up? Are we going to fight tomorrow? Are we going to voice our opinion? There's never been one room that I've walked into that I've ever denied that I was formerly incarcerated. To the day that I met the President of the United States, I let him know where my background was. Because they had to get used to seeing our faces in places of respect and of power and stop looking at us as second-class citizens, where in other countries, they see the people that go into prison as their citizens. In Germany, they look at it as a process of resocialization, but in the United States, it's focused specifically on punishment. Something that's never been proven to change behavior for the better. But yet we continue to do so.
Amazing. Thank you. All right, we have a little more time now for questions. I know that there's been a lot of fire, a lot of passion. There's heaviness, and there's also light. And we have a few more minutes to listen to your burning questions.
You know, this story, I sat in this chair and I almost cried because it's unfortunate that any young person would have to go through those sorts of things in order to become what you have become and to make these sorts of contributions that you're currently making. I guess what my question is, for each of you, given that you've all sort of been incarcerated for different reasons, if I want you to tell me as an educator, what things I could have done when you first entered into that jail to have, to address you in a way that it would have made you, that would have rehabilitated you. What would have been an effective approach given the situations for which you were incarcerated? What could I do as an educator, as a professional, to help you turn around?
I love you for this, but you know, I feel like this is like the problem, right? Where she's saying like,
this is like what?
Well, I said I feel like this is the problem in the sense of like, you have such a beautiful soul and asking like, what can I do? When you have a whole system that's helping you to really help us. But
that's true. But a system is made of people.
For sure.
and I'm just saying for me, because I'm often looking for where should we have begun. Certainly. Putting you in solitary confinement is no way near a proper approach. So I'm just saying, where should these systems then begin? What would have been more effective?
Look, yeah, first of all, I think that kids come in with all kinds of problems. You don't know what kinds of problems they're coming in with, first of all, right? You don't know what their background is or how they're coming in, but you don't throw a kid who has mental illness or there's something going on with him, you don't put a kid like that in solitary confinement and expect him to come out and he's healed already. You know what I mean? That's not how it works. That's not how it works. These kids need like people to talk to, like therapists. These people need resources. These people come back from all kinds of bad places. Look, if you want to spend your money, the best thing, I'm telling you, I grew up in South Central LA, the low bottom, one of the worst places you can be on. I'm talking about Scott Budding, the founder of ARC. One time he told me, brother, you live in the armpit of America. You know what I mean? That's South Central LA. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you the truth. You see it all right there. If you want to spend your money, that's where you spend your money, in the places that need it. All these places that they donating, all them resources, people are coming up with programs in schools with all that stuff is on the west side. All that stuff ends up in the west side. It never ends in South Central LA. The schools that really need it, Jefferson High, Carver Middle School, Ascot Elementary School, all these places that really don't have teachers that are getting paid well, people who are training these kids to play sports. They cut all of that off. How you expect a kid who's little, has violence at home, has violence in the streets, go to school, and then there's violence there, and they're not even paying attention to them. That's where the money need to go, for real. That's where all the money needs to go.
And I also want to say that when I was inside juvenile facility, I wasn't actually getting taught what I needed to be taught. I was doing geometry, and they're teaching me algebra 1. That's right. How am I doing pre-algebra and I'm on geometry? And then from there, I asked the teacher, hey, can I get other type of work? And they're like, you know what, just take this test. When I have taken this test a million times, taking the same test, and they're saying, oh, I graduated with geometry, when I'm not even getting the courses of learning geometry. I wish that how he says is the whole system. Because we gotta, as a person, I guess individually, what you can do and the most you can do is motivate other teachers to do that, to teach good. They say that also technology for kids is a way to distract kids. Brain pop, having new technology that interests these kids is a way to distract them, getting more into learning. When you're teaching the kid the same thing over and over and over and over and over, he's not learning. All he's doing is just sitting there and wasting all the money that everybody's putting into. That's right, Johnny. So we have to change a lot of stuff in the juvenile facility and do everything we can.
Okay. Yes, another question here.
I grew up in South LA too. Right now, something that's like really been motivating me, I've been working with some young men who are currently being tried as adults up at Barry J. Nydorf right now. And being out there, a conversation I had with some of them last week was around them having this perception of themselves that people will never see them as, full human beings, and they're facing this hopelessness. And I'm trying to tell them, things that I've been through, but I've never, had been in a situation where I was like on the ends like them. And I'm just guessing my question for you guys is, what do I tell them to make sure that they hold on to that hope? Because I'm feeling for them and I'm loving on them and I want them to get through this hopeless spell that they're in. But I want them to know like there is something for you to hold on to. So what type of words, what things did you all hold on to keep you motivated and grounded to know that when this phase passes, I'm going to continue to pursue my truth?
I'm gonna tell you the one secret of mentoring. And there's no specific word that you can say. There's no magic word. There's no lesson. It's literally you showing up. It's you showing up. It took me 18 months to finally realize that someone cared about me because I was so used to people turning their back on me. And you're not alone. If you need help to learn how to connect with them, we send in our guys to Barry J. Nydorf too into the compound every single weekend. So you can also hang out with us and see the conversations that we have. But the biggest and strongest tool you have, especially as a man in their life, because most of them have had men that have shown them the wrong way, is to be there and to let them know that you're going to stand by them. Scott Bunnick, white Jewish guy. Trust me, when I saw him, I'm like, what is this guy doing in here? But the kids love him because he keeps coming. And when they go to prison, he keeps writing them. And when they come home, he gets them jobs because he's actually true about what he says. And they're going to see that you're true about what you say if you continue to show up.
Awesome. All right, we have time, I think, for about 2 or 3 more questions. Yes, definitely.
I'm just looking at the hashtag behind you says schools, not prisons. But when we have to stop constructing schools that are built like prisons. When you talk about South Central, I grew up in Watts, Gompers, and all these other schools. They're built like prisons. And then you have liquor stores on the blocks. And so it's like, we come from the struggles. We come from places where, like, when we go to kindergarten, we're going to prisons. So solitary confinements are preschools. Solitary confinements are kindergartens. So in a way for us to kind of like think about like getting out of solitary confinement, we have to stop creating our schools like prisons. And that's kind of just, I just want to say that.
Awesome. So I grew up in South LA too as well, South Central. Went to college, privileged, had a great family. But my question is, I know that it's very difficult for people that are in prisons to find employment after. What was that process like? How did you find employment?
My first time I had a job and they gave me the opportunity to have a job was acting. No one ever gave me the opportunity to work for them. And the reason why is because I admitted I did errors that were honestly bad to do. And because of that, I had a record. And because of the record, they didn't want to hire me. But when someone has the desire to want to change, to want to prosper in life, to just do good, you should give them the opportunity. You should, because I didn't get the opportunity. I say that every person in every position, that they deserve a second chance. They deserve a second chance. They gave me a second chance. That's why I'm here speaking about it. That's why I'm here talking about it, because we have to create voices, give people opportunity. Also, not give people starving wages, but giving living wages. You know, we give all these people like money, like we're corporation, McDonald's. My cousin owns a doghouse. She makes almost 1.2 million in a year, and she gives, you know how much to her employees? $30 an hour. That's because she appreciates and she doesn't need a lot of money. We don't need a lot of money. We don't need to have all this money and just sit down and buy a Ferrari, buy a Lamborghini. Let's help change the world in every way we can. And I keep saying it. It's in music. It's in helping the community. It's in building schools. It's in showing the kids the real stuff that they have to learn. You know, their opinion is their performances, basically. And if you teach them the right stuff and the right stuff that they have to learn, at the young age, they're gonna learn. I learned at a young age. I was 16 years old making my own money. And my dad, I wish he would have helped me, but you know what? Something that my dad taught me was to be independent. And that's something that I love from him, and I can't take away from him, but I wish he would have gave me a lot, but he didn't give it to me in the moment because he showed me what other kids have and what other kids outside of the world don't have. And there's kids out there that have it worse than us. And it's not about having it worse, it's about just helping in every way we can. I strongly believe that we should help. If I had $6 billion, to end world war hunger, $6 billion. There's people that have billions of dollars. If I had that amount of money, trust me, in a heartbeat, I would give everybody, and I'll even stay hungry, because that's the type of person I am. They robbed my childhood. They took my childhood away. But you know what motivates me and what keeps me up and what keeps me with a smile every day? It's the kids. Come on. It's the future. And that's what keeps me alive still, because my childhood was robbed. And I don't wish that to no one in my life. No one in my life. I wish the best and everything possible that can happen to them in a positive way.
Ooh, incredible. All right, last question.
And I just want to say, I really do want you to continue to be encouraged. And I hear you talk about if we had money, what we can do with money. Yes. However, we live in a society today where laws and rules and policies is what causes us to do what we do. So what I'm saying is that if you can get more involved with your civic duty and change some of these laws. Like, for example, this year is a very important year to be a registered voter. There are several ballots, there are several issues on the ballot that really pertains to exactly what we're talking about. So we're talking, if you could do something in that area, you would be preventing, you would be helping somebody. And there are many of us who may not be able to vote for some reason or another. I'm calling it get the buddy system. If you know someone who is eligible to vote, get with them and learn and study the policies and tell them, if I was a voter, if I was eligible to vote, this is what I would vote for. Ask that person to vote for what it is that you can't vote for because of your citizen status. We have to try to get together and win this together. And we cannot separate ourselves anymore. We have to think togetherness. And when we do it together in numbers, that's what counts.
Incredible. All right, obviously we're not ending this conversation. This conversation is going to continue outside these doors and in your homes and in your workplaces. And I'm going to continue to have this conversation across the country. And all of us here are connected in this moment, and that connection will live on. So thank you all. Beautiful night.